نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين
آمين.
والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum Abdullah. Inshallah, we'll be starting our month-end program immediately after Sunnat and Witr. Inshallah, I request all brothers to participate. Inshallah, after Bayan, we'll have the dinner. Inshallah. The topic is principle of marriage. So immediately after Sunnat and Witr, inshallah, we'll start the program.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The brothers are done, you can inshallah come a bit closer. The brothers are done, inshallah you can come a bit closer. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is inshallah where I was requested to come and talk to the brothers and sisters inshallah, youngsters and elders inshallah, about the topic of marriage in Islam. The topic of marriage within Islam. And obviously this is such a giant, a huge topic. We're not going to be able to encompass all of it in a 1 hour session. But nevertheless inshallah we will we'll try inshallah. And with anything, any topic within Islam, we always start with the Quran and the proofs from within Quran, and then we go into ahadith and the proofs within ahadith, and then we continue in that manner. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the Quran, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اتَّقُوا اللَّهَ حَقَّ تُقَاتِهِ وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. O you who believe, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as He deserves to be feared, and do not die except in the state of Islam. Except in the state of Islam. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O you who believe, fear your Lord, who has created you from a single soul and created from it his pair, his spouse, and has spread forth from them many men and women. And fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through whom you ask each other, and be wary and fear the blood relations. Indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever watchful over you. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. O you who believe, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and speak righteous words and speak the truth. يُصْلِحْ لَكُمْ أَعْمَالَكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will correct for you and fix for you your actions, and Allah will forgive you your sins. And whoever obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, indeed he has been completely successful. So these are the three ayat that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would recite and would give a talk about when he is instructing the Sahaba, when he's engaging in a ceremony for marriage. These ayat are concerning the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just briefly, what is the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? There is khawf, there is khashyah, and there is taqwa. And we don't have time to get into each single one, but taqwa is not the fear where you fear, for example, a lion, or you fear, for example, an earthquake. Taqwa is one where you fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you don't want to do anything to upset Him, to be out of His good graces. This is the taqwa, as if someone who has taken care of you your whole life, they've never done anything wrong to you. They've always pleased you, they've been there when you need Him and when you didn't need Him. So when He asks you for something, how do you take care of this responsibility? That is taqwa. You basically go about your daily life in a certain manner that pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is taqwa. So what is the relationship between taqwa and marriage? The fear of Allah, piety and marriage. Piety has everything to do with marriage. Piety has everything to do with marriage, and marriage has everything to do with piety. Many people, we will step back and look at the American culture, and I'm going to look at marriage from the American Muslim paradigm. We unfortunately grow up in this environment, for those who are born and raised here, or those who have been here for a while. We get in this mentality, what I call the Disney mentality, where everything is golden, everything is perfect. You know, somebody's sleeping for ages and then wakes up to prince, you know, this handsome prince, and then they live happily ever after. And so what happens is we grow up with this mentality. We tend to call our daughters princesses. We tend to call our sons princes. And then we think that they're going to end up getting married and become kings over everything and queens over everything. So we're sort of setting them up for failure from the beginning, because this is not truly what marriage is. Marriage is not something where two people come together and each one thinks the other one is there to serve them. This is not what marriage is about. True marriage is the bringing together of two people. As a matter of fact, true marriage is the bringing together of two families. And actually, marriage is the bringing together of two societies. That's what marriage truly is. And marriage is, once somebody is married, they'll realize the recipe for a successful marriage is not belief in the Disney mentality or this false, fairy tale mentality, but it is patience, it is compromise, it is piety, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the gist of a successful marriage. But obviously there are many details, right? This is the summary, but obviously marriage entails a lot of details. So what should a person do in order to have a successful marriage? Who should we look towards, right? What should we look to? And I'll explain one thing. We're coming from many different perspectives, right? A child, what does a child look forward to when he's thinking about marriage or she's thinking about marriage? And how should they prepare for it? Once a person's in their teens, how should they act? Once a person's ready for marriage, what should they be looking for? Whether male or female. Once you've become married, your honeymoon, how should that go? Right? And once you're past the honeymoon, how should you prepare for the rest of your lives together? When you become a parent, how should you look at marriage for your children? Then as a greater society, how should society treat their individuals and prepare them for marriage? Every single person has a responsibility, right? كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ وَكُلُّكُمْ مَسْئُولٌ عَنْ رَعِيَّتِهِ. Every one of you is responsible and will be held accountable for his and her responsibility, right? So every single one of us is responsible. As soon as you hit the age of puberty, Islamically you are a man, a Muslim man, or a Muslim woman. As soon as you hit that age, you are a Muslim man or Muslim woman. And to just give you an idea, there was a person, a Sahabi by the name of Salamat ibn Aqwa, radiallahu anhu. We'll go over these. There are a lot of various stories I'll go into briefly, inshallah. How many of you know of his story where he fended off the camels of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Quick show of hands. So Salamat ibn Aqwa radiallahu anhu was a very fast and brave archer. He was very fast, he was very brave. As a matter of fact, he was so fast, he would be able to catch up to an Arabian horse. Right? And we know some people have been given such an ability that they're so fast. He was so fast he would catch an Arabian horse, and many horses wouldn't be able to catch him. So he would play this game, he would start chasing down these horses and catch them and then mount them. And he was such a precise shooter, a sharp shooter, he would shoot an arrow and hit his target. And he became known amongst the people of Mecca for this. He became known amongst Arabia for this. So what happened was once, a bunch of looters, right, a bunch of gangsters, went and tried to steal the camels of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and actually went off with the camels of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're actually the camels from the Baytul Mal. And what happened is he actually pursued this by himself. he pursued the whole caravan by himself. And as he's pursuing them, he's shooting arrows at them from one side, then he would jump to another, run, go to another side and shoot them. They're on horses and they're pulling their camels, and Salamat ibn Aqwa radiallahu anhu is chasing them, shooting arrows so swiftly that it seemed as if it was a whole army after them. And so they started running away and they started leaving their camels behind. They started leaving their camels behind. To make a long story short, what happened afterwards is he was able to actually save the whole group of camels. And slowly the other Sahaba caught up to him on horses, and then they basically brought reinforcements. So Salamat ibn Aqwa, who did this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was fending off, defending his camels, the camels of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the camels from Baytul Mal. What I want to point out is, how old was he when he did this? Does anybody know how old he was when this happened? Some say he was 12 years old, some say he was 15 years old. From 12 to 15 years old, the bravery he had, the maturity that he had, when he was such a young Sahabi. As a matter of fact, when they realized it's only one person, because he would hide behind a tree, hide behind somewhere, so they couldn't tell who was attacking. When they finally found out it was just one boy, one man, one boy, one adult, then he climbed up on top of an area and he said, none of you can get up past me because I'm such a precise shooter. And if I run out of arrows, then none of you can catch me, I'm so fast, and so on and so forth. So the bottom line is that these Sahaba, not just him, he's just one example of how a boy becomes a man in Islam. Once he hits the age of puberty, he is a man, an Islamic man. He has to pray. He has to practice hijab. Not just hijab is not something that a person just wears. Hijab is a state of mind and a state of practice. So he has to start doing hijab. He realizes he's no longer unaccountable. He's no longer held free from account. He has to give account to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But does our society treat this child as a man, as he should be treated? Do we hold him to be an adult? Maybe not this community, but I know of many communities where there are young adults, the ages of 24 or the ages of 27, still living with their parents. Still living with their parents at the age of maybe 27. And we're supposed to treat our young men like men at the age of 12 to 14 and 15. So this is number one. There's a responsibility on everybody's shoulder. This boy must be taught and must know that he is responsible. This young girl who now becomes mature must realize that she is also responsible. That her actions will have repercussions or positive results. So this is a responsibility from the child's perspective, and the society as a whole. We must teach our children responsibility. Now that you are old enough, this age comes with responsibility. Right? This is one aspect. So again, I'm trying to point out that every single person in society is responsible, because no man is a village. It takes a whole village, a whole community to raise a single child. And once we raise this child will inshallah inevitably grow up and then get married and become a productive member of society, whether it's a boy or a girl, a man or a male or a female. But we have to get this mindset out there. There's many things to cover. So now the question is, who should we be looking towards as role models for our children, for our young grooms and brides, and for ourselves as adults and ourselves as parents? Obviously it's not these fairy tales, right? Because these are fake. We should be looking at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should be looking at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best of all examples. He wasn't just the best prophet. He was an example for every aspect of our lives. As a leader, he was an example. As a father, he was an example. As a husband, he was an example. And we have to focus on him being a father for this discourse, and him as a husband. And for the sister side, we should look at those women who were promised paradise. We should look at those women who were promised paradise. Obviously, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is an example. But how should we act if we're females, if we're girls, if we're women? How should we act? The objective for every single person in this room, and myself inshallah, is to enter paradise inshallah, inevitably. And marriage is one of those things that we go through to help us enter paradise. So inevitably we're trying to enter paradise, and marriage is supposed to help us. It is said that before marriage a person only has half their religion, and once they get married they complete the other half. Right? Ad-dunya kulluha mata'. This whole world is futile, meaning it has a limit. It ends. It's almost mortal. This whole world is futile. It basically has an end to it. It doesn't last till infinity. But the best thing you can come across for the males, for the brothers, the best thing you can use and utilize and take advantage of and use as a resource and as an assistance is a pious woman. Is a pious woman. I don't know if it's an American saying or an outside saying. They say a happy wife, a happy life, right? So when she's happy, alhamdulillah, we're happy. And this goes back to what? There are many things that we have to understand and understand the wisdom behind it. We might understand it, we might not have fully understood it. But we look at Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. We were all created from who? Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. And our mother was created from his rib. Was created from his rib, correct? And so we look at the hadith that women, if you go to straighten something that's such as a rib, you'll break it, so you have to utilize it as it is, correct? And so unfortunately many times we don't fully comprehend what it means. We don't fully comprehend what it means. We tend to look at it from our perspective because we're self-centric. Self-centric means the whole world spins around me. That's self-centric. But we shouldn't be self-centric because the world does not spin around us. And for sisters as well, the whole world does not spin around us either, right? The females, the world does not spin around us. We are just a member of this greater society, of this whole creation. So, what I'm getting at is, how should we live? How should a sister live her life? There are 4 women of paradise that are guaranteed paradise. Maryam alayha salatu wassalam, Asiya alayha salatu wassalam, Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, and Fatima radiallahu ta'ala anha. And they were guaranteed paradise. We have to look at why they were guaranteed paradise. What did they do to get paradise? And then we look at from the brother's side. Obviously we have to be like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in every manner. And we look at the Ashara Mubashara, the 10 that are guaranteed paradise. What did they do to get paradise as a guarantee? What did they do? So many times when people first get married, right? Alhamdulillah, they go through their honeymoon. And then after a while, what do they start thinking? I wish my wife was like a sahabiyah. I wish she was like the mothers of the believers. And what's the response? Why aren't we like the Prophet ﷺ? Right? If we're expecting them to act like the women of Jannah, why aren't we acting like the men of Jannah? Islam is fair. And Islam is complete. If you take one single aspect and you just put it into a little bubble, you're not going to understand it. But when you act upon all of Islam completely, it comes together like a puzzle that looks beautiful. Like a puzzle that looks beautiful. So you have a responsibility as men, I'm talking to the brothers here, and you also have rights. Islam isn't unfair. Allah is the most just. And sisters, you have a responsibility and you also have rights. Does that make sense? Brothers, you have responsibilities and you have rights. If you fulfill your responsibilities, you will be getting your rights. You should know your rights. Different paradigm, but you should still know your rights and know your responsibilities. Sisters, if you fulfill your responsibilities, you'll be given your rights. And even if you're not fulfilling, you should still be given your rights. You should know your rights and you should know your responsibilities. So now to get back on what an Islamic marriage is. Number 1, in order for you to go through this marriage, a person who's reached the age of marriage, once they're married, they will realize that their whole life has changed. They'll realize their whole life has changed. Allah has put something in us, alhamdulillah, this desire to get married, that pushes us forward to get married. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put something in us that gives us this desire to get married. But once we get into marriage, we have to realize that there are responsibilities along with benefits. There's always a trade-off. So we have to be acclimated with the responsibilities of marriage. It's not just the outward Islamic aspect that we look at, for example, praying, right? Fasting, Hajj, societal relationships. All of this is just one aspect. Once you get married, for those who have gotten married, you'll realize even the fact that you like the heat and she likes the cold, or you like the cold and she likes the heat, even that will be a compromise. Every single thing changes. Every single thing changes, and it's an adjustment in your life and in her life. So because there's this huge adjustment, are we training our children to become mature enough to handle this responsibility? If we're not, are we at least training them to be pious? A couple, they now have children. What happens when newborns are born? The child, many times, often more than not, they cry at the middle of the night. Correct? And so, who has to get up and take care of the child? An honest and pious family will take turns getting up. So the share is evenly distributed. But you have two people, a husband and a wife. They never prayed Fajr. They've never prayed Fajr. How hard will it be for them to get up in the middle of the night and take care of their child? This husband and wife, when they were children, they've never gotten up for tahajjud, qiyam al-layl. How hard will it be for them to sacrifice their sleep and get up for this child? Whereas a child who's been trained on Fajr in Jama'ah and congregation, who has been trained on tahajjud, he knows his sleep is, even though desirable, it is more pleasurable to Allah to wake up and sacrifice his sleep. So now he gets up in the middle of the night to please Allah. And now that he's a young adult, he's getting married, he gets up to take care of his child. A sister who has been taught to get up and cry in front of Allah in the middle of the night, to do tahajjud in the middle of the night, now she already has a habit of sacrificing her sleep. When it comes time to take care of the child in the middle of the night, what happens? She has become accustomed to pleasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We rarely draw the connection of piety and marriage, and how these things help us become better husbands and wives, better spouses. But the more we practice Islam, the more easier it becomes. So there were a couple of questions posed to me actually, and we'll jump right into them inshallah. How to choose a spouse. How should a person choose a spouse? Obviously the first answer is taqwa, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I want to advise you on the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's no specific group of people known as the muttaqeen. Muttaqeen in Arabic are those people who have taqwa, fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the pious group. As a matter of fact, we know there's corruption in every level of society. I'm not trying to bring anybody down, but there's corruption maybe amongst engineers, corruption amongst doctors, lawyers, politicians. You might even find a scholar who might not always practice what he preaches. He might not always practice what he preaches. When you want to marry your daughter to a person, let him be pious. If you want to marry your son to someone, a bride, let her be pious. Pick someone who has piety. So I bring you the story of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. How many of you know the story of Umar bin Abdul Aziz? I've heard his name. Quick show of hands. So Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahimahullah ta'ala, he was deemed to be the 5th Khalifa al-Rashida, the 5th amongst the Khulafa al-Rashideen. We jumped 2 generations beforehand. Umar radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu was going around the houses. And what did he do? He basically obviously set some law. He is the Khalifa, he is Amir al-Mu'mineen, and he is setting some rules, and amongst the rules is that you should be honest in your trade and you should not mix water with milk. And obviously some online translations say you should not mix water with yogurt. Obviously yogurt, laban, in modern Arabic means yogurt, right? And in classical Arabic, laban means milk. Nevertheless, so you should not mix water with milk. And what happened? So he was going around just taking care of the city, making sure everyone is safe. This is after he's taken on his day job. At night time he would go around with his servant Aslam rahimahullah ta'ala and take care of the needs of the people. He was passing by one house and he heard a discussion between a mother and her daughter. And the mother basically tells the daughter, "Did you mix water with the milk?" And what does she say? "No, I cannot, because haven't you heard the Amir al-Mu'mineen forbidding us from doing such a practice? So the mother said, my daughter, where are you and where is the Amir al-Mu'mineen? Meaning he's so far away. Where's the Amir al-Mu'mineen? And you're right here in this house in the privacy and seclusion of your own home. So she says, what about the Lord of Umar? What about the Lord of Umar? Isn't he watching even if the Amir al-Mu'mineen isn't watching? So Umar secretly just marks that house. And he asks his servant, Aslam, to find out about this house the next day. Not to punish them. What he does is, after he asks Aslam about this house, Aslam rahimahullah responds saying, I found out that there's actually no father or no male figure in this house. And the daughter is the age for marriage and whatnot. And they basically are in need and so on and so forth. So then he quickly gathers his sons, the sons of the Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he gathers them and he says, I have found a pious woman. And I want you to marry her. If I had any need to get married, I would have married her myself. So I want one of you to marry her. And so the eldest two sons, all of them said, I'm already married, alhamdulillah, so I have no need. But Asim radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, I have a need to get married. And so he marries her. And from their offsprings, remember, they got married, why? Because she feared Allah. She had piety. From their children, they had a daughter. And from their daughter, they had a son. And the son's name was Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Rahimahullah ta'ala. He brought justice, and he brought back justice to the ummah as if it was the time of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he did this in a matter of 2.5 years. Not 4 years, not 2 terms. 2.5 years he brought back justice amongst the people. So this comes from where? From piety. When a person chooses a spouse on piety, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless them. So this is how you choose a spouse. By piety, not by apparent outward display of religion, but by true piety. When they're dealing with you in business, are they honest? Are they cheating you in business? This matters. How do they conduct themselves? What are their manners? Are they humble? Are they sacrificing? If they're going to be arrogant in front of you and you're a male, they're going to be more arrogant in front of your daughter. She's a female. Are they taking care of the masjid? Do they help around in the masjid? If they can't help out in the masjid, how are they going to help out in the house? So look for these characteristics that show God fear, piety and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inside their manners. Continuing inshallah, parents need to do what? So this is when we're searching. Now that our children are of age, we start searching. But what a parent should actually do is prepare their child for marriage. As soon as they hit the age of puberty, start teaching them about Islam. And Islam also includes how you treat others. If he is obedient to his mother, how is he towards his sister? You look at that and make sure he is kind towards his mother, kind towards his sister. Is he helping his mother in the house? Is he helping his sisters in the house? In my family, alhamdulillah, we've been blessed with men who can cook as good as the women. Alhamdulillah, these are characteristics that a person should have. It's not just how good you cook, barbecue on a grill, that's not just that. It's actually cooking and preparing and whatnot. These are stuff that you need to know. Are we training our young boys to take care of the house as well as take care of their responsibilities outside the house? And similarly for our daughters, are we teaching them how to take care of the house as well and take care of matters outside the house? So the responsibility that the parent has to take on years in advance, decades in advance of their marriage. Does that make sense? You are responsible for your children. And having your children married to pious spouses is also part of your responsibility. This is the parental responsibility and the societal responsibility. From the society's aspect, where are they learning Islam from? Is there a maktab? Is there a place where these children are learning basics of Islam? It's important to know alif ba ta tha. Do not get me wrong. It is important to read Surah An-Nas properly with tajweed, Surah Al-Ikhlas with tajweed, Surah Al-Fatiha with tajweed. That is important. But Islam is not just the Quran. It is the practice of the Quran. It is the practice of the Quran. When asked by our mother Aisha about Rasulullah, she said something, and for those who are married, do the brothers in this room know you better than your wives? Or do your wives usually know you better than the brothers in the masjid? Usually, alhamdulillah, our wives know us better than the brothers in the masjid. We might be looking like we're good Muslims in the masjid. MashaAllah, this brother's so amazing. I'll give you a quick story of Abu Darda. He was very pious. He was an ascetic. I don't have time to go into his full life. It's an amazing story though. So one time, Salman al-Farsi was made a brother of Abu Darda. So they were both brothers, like Muhajirs and Ansar were made brothers. So he came over to the house of his brother before hijab came down. And what did he see? He saw the wife of Abu Darda in a manner that wasn't appropriate for a wife. She looked very poor, unkept, not taken care of. And so he asked her, what's going on? And then she said, your brother in Islam does not have any need for anything in this dunya. He is so pious. So to say that he is so pious from a Muslim brother is a compliment. But for a wife to say he is too pious is not a compliment. It says that something is wrong. I'll explain why. Abu Darda used to fast all day. And then he would come home and he would stay up and cry all night. But what happened? So Salman said, okay, I'll handle this. He waited until Abu Darda came home. So Abu Darda came home and presents some food and he tells Salman to eat. Salman says, I'm not going to eat until you eat. So Abu Darda breaks his fast. And they both sit down and they both start eating. Right? And remember, this is a nafil fast. Right? Obviously if it was a fard fast, both of them would be fasting, right? So this is a nafil fast. You're allowed to break your nafil fast for a guest, and obviously you make this up. So then what happens? Then they obviously pray Maghrib, they obviously pray Isha. After Isha, Abu Darda prepares the place for Salman to sleep. And then he tells him, go to sleep. This is your bed. And then Abu Darda tries to sneak off. Salman holds him and says, you go to sleep as well. So they both go to bed. Right? They're both going to sleep. So Abu Darda waits a little bit until he thinks Salman is sleeping. And then he quietly gets up to do what? To do qiyam, nothing bad, to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And very quiet like a mouse, right? And so Salman pulls him back and says, go back to sleep. This happens a couple of times until 2/3 of the night had passed. And then Salman himself wakes up, Abu Darda and says, now let's stand up and let's pray. For qiyam al-layl, for tahajjud. Anyway, he says, the end of the hadith is, Inna li badanika alayka haq. Indeed, your body has a right on you. And indeed, your spouse has a right on you. And indeed, basically, Allah has a right on you. Everything has a right on you. Give everything its right. Fulfill its haqq. Fulfill its right. Which means that he has a right on his wife as well. So he needs to take care of her. This is one instance. There was another instance of Abdullah bin Amr bin As and he himself, he was also caught, being very pious. SubhanAllah, nowadays we get caught with bad things. MashaAllah, they get caught with praying qiyamul layl and fasting all the time. SubhanAllah, look at the difference, right? Look at the difference. Anyway, so his father, Amr bin As who came and said, no, you have to fulfill her rights. So anyway, we have to fulfill each other's right, even when it comes to that. It's not just Quran, not just learning what the Quran is. Our wives know us best, right? So our mother Aisha anha knew Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Sahaba and Tabi would ask our mother Aisha anha, how was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And she said, "Kana khuluquhu al-Quran." Or kama qalat ummuna Aisha anha, that his mannerisms was the Quran. And some paraphrase this to be, he was as if it was the Quran walking. This is how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. He was as if he was the Quran walking. So he would be, when he would pray, it's as if he was the most pious when he was praying. Not as if he was the most pious, most God-fearing when he prayed. He was the best leader, the best general, the best father, the best husband. After his long day of work, and we know how long he would pray tahajjud at home as well. Tahajjud was fard for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would still take time out and take care of the chores of the house. He would still come home and take care of the chores of the house. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for my blemishes. But the truth must be told. He would be helping out his wives, our mothers, in their chores. And he would help out Khadija in her chores. Imagine. Not only would he help them in their chores. If anybody was a man, it was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can't get more manly and masculine than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the most manly and masculine of men is being the softest towards his wife. The most honorable, the most masculine, the most brolic, the most strongest of men is being the softest towards his wife. So he is defining masculinity. He is defining masculinity. He said, خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِ. So he says, the best of you, meaning speaking to the males, the brothers, is the best to his wife, and I am the best to you, to my wife. Meaning I'm the best of all of you to his own spouse. I am the best amongst all of you to his own spouse. I will give you an example of Umar al-Taran as well, because many times we hear about many different Sahaba, and we should. And we know the characteristic of Umar al-Taran, who is very strong when it comes to the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was even, he basically said that the people have lost their way and they have become bad. This is in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the men have lost their way, so the women should wear hijab. They should cover themselves. Anyway, so if anybody was, when Rasulullah sallallahu was amongst his wives, our mothers, and their voices got loud. And then what happened is Umar al-Taran entered. And when he entered, the Ummahat al-Mu'mineen, our mothers, found out and they quieted their voices. They quieted their voices. Even though we know that we should not raise our voice above the voice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah was so soft, he didn't say anything to them. But as soon as Umar al-Taran entered, they lowered their voices. Who should they have lowered their voices in front of? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But he is kind and soft, and they perceive him to be harsh. But let me tell you an example of the house of Umar radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu. One of the Sahabis, he basically got into a dispute with his wife, and she was raising her voice and she was yelling at him, and obviously telling him off and so on and so forth. And so he went to go complain to Umar radhiyallahu anhu, who had now become a Khalifa, the Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he says because the Sahabi is thinking these women, they're getting so, they're having so much, they're getting so bold. We need to do something about this. So he's traveling, walking towards the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen. As he's coming close, he hears the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen raising her voice and scolding Umar al-Taran. And he is saying nothing back. And so he hears this, he is shocked. He is shocked. So Umar al-Taran somehow heard his footsteps, and so he came to the door, and this Sahabi was actually about to leave. He's saying, if Umar al-Taran is having this situation in his house, as strong as he is, what's he going to do for me? What's he going to do for me? So Umar al-Taran saw him and said, wait, tell me what you need. And so he explained the situation, but he said, I don't think you can help me. And so Umar al-Taran said, look, these women, they leave their families to be with us. Most situations, these young daughters, they leave their households where they're comfortable, if they're daddy's girls, or they have comfort, they have their own leisure, and they come into our houses. In a hadith of Rasulullah, they're almost like captives. And so they have to find a place to vent. And so you have to be soft enough to let them vent. You have to be soft enough to let them vent. The wisdom of Umar radhiyallahu was that in front of the people who you be tough and strong, because he had to set a standard. But he was amongst the softest of people when you got to know him, when you saw his house life. Imagine somebody as brave as Umar al-Taran, as strong as him. He was soft in front of women. And we think we're masculine, we're soft on the street, and we're lions in the house. We're punks on the street. Forgive me for saying that. We're soft on the street and we're lions in the house. We're supposed to be lions on the street and soft in the house. We're supposed to be lions on the street, protecting Islam, and we're supposed to be soft inside the house. Who's going to teach this meaning of the Quran to our children? This has to be taught from a young age. By practice. When a child sees his father hitting his mother, he himself learns that abuse is okay. And when a daughter sees the father hitting the mother, she thinks it's okay for me to be abused. You're destroying your wife and you're destroying your children. You're destroying your wife and you're destroying your children. Rasulullah ﷺ forbade, in one narration, hitting women. There are very few exceptions and people misconstrue them, but there is a manner to address this. There's a manner for reconciliation. I'm going too far into detail. I don't have the time to cover all of this. But the point is this: how should we create a society so that they're geared up and ready to marry in a proper manner, where they have the least amount of divorce, they have the most amount of happiness? A husband's responsibility on a wife, the minimal responsibility is housing, clothing, and food, to the same standard that you're accustomed to. If you're wearing $200 suits, she should have at least that. And with $200, you probably buy one suit. And she could probably buy 5, 10 different suits. She should have the same level of food that you're eating. You're going out in business lunches, eating all this extravagant food. What about the family? The shelter. She needs to have shelter. And there might be a culture clash here. There's many different cultures. I can't address any single culture here. But we have to address the nuclear family. The family on hand. Who's in the house? Many times overseas, and maybe even in the Midwest and other areas, we have bigger properties and whatnot. You have a bigger extended family, right? The grandparents live with the family, the parents live with the family, the children are there, so on and so forth. In many urban areas, we tend to have smaller families. We call them small nuclear families, meaning the families are it's just the husband and wife. Most of the time, it's just the husband and wife. Each side has its trade-off. If you have a large family, then there's a trade-off. There are benefits and there are costs, right? There's positive and negative. If you have a small family, you have positive and negative, right? With a small family, the wife has more comfort. The husband has more comfort, more leisure, more flexibility, correct? Because you're not always at the helm and at the bequest of your parents. But also at the same time, when you need help, they're not around. So you have to understand the trade-off. If you have a big family, what happens? Obviously, what happens is sometimes not everybody gets their way. There's more to compromise in a larger family. But at the same time, daycare is easier. Watching the kids is easier. You have that village taking care of that family. You have to understand that as well. You can't have it both ways. Does that make sense? You can't have it both ways. This is especially true for newlyweds. You have to realize what is important. And the husband has to realize that she needs at least her own area. This is her haqq. Her shelter has to be her own shelter. This is her right. So she has to have a safe space, even from in-laws. Truth be told, even from in-laws from both sides. And he might need his own safe space if he's living with his in-laws, right? So you need that comfortability, but at the same time, you can have larger areas and live in these larger areas where they're close together and whatnot. But that is something that a newlywed couple has to decide, or the family has to decide. But realize that a lot of the hardships nowadays for dense urban areas is because all of the responsibility falls unfairly on the wife. When she becomes a mother, what happens? Especially if she's a new mother, she might maybe not accustomed to the child. Where's the help coming from? Right? Where are all her friends? Where are all the sisters in the community who are supposed to help her? So you have to, if you're a man, you have to realize that this is a difficult time. You have to be there just as she's there. Let go of the cultural baggage where the wife only takes care of the child. This is not how Rasulullah ﷺ did it. Who defines Islam? Rasulullah ﷺ. This is not how he did it. And at the same time, the 4 women who were promised paradise, each one of them was either an absolute amazing wife to a prophet, or an amazing mother to a prophet, or the amazing daughter of a prophet. They gave support. We talked about the rib, but not in detail. Look at the rib. The rib that women are made from. Our mother Hawa was made from it. It is bent, and there's beauty in this bend. We hardly talk about the beauty in this bend. How many people here are in architecture? For those who aren't, structurally speaking, columns can support a certain weight when you have these squares. And arcs also support a different type of weight. And there's beauty in this arc, which is why you have all these domes in masajid overseas. There's beauty in this curve. There's beauty in this bend. So you have to understand, accept, and utilize this to your advantage and work with it. Not everything should be snapped straight. So they have their benefits and we have our benefits. And we have to compromise to take full advantage of both sides. Brothers, when you get married, marriage is compromise. Sisters, when you get married, marriage is compromise. You have to communicate. You have to communicate. You have to communicate. Now communication is important. Obviously, I'm just going to cover very few bullet points. So communication is important. Number 2, I want to go over the ease of marriage as well. This is another societal problem. There's a rule in Islam. When the halal is made hard, the haram becomes easy. When the halal is made hard, the haram becomes easy. When the halal is made easy, the haram slowly go away. Now look at marriage. How hard have some societies made marriage? How hard have some societies made marriage? When a pious groom-to-be sees a pious bride-to-be, there should be no delay in the marriage. It should be very easy. As a matter of fact, the khutbatun nikah, truly speaking, is saying, I have married you, and she has said, I have married you, with the dowry in front of witnesses and obviously somebody to conduct the wedding, conduct the marriage ceremony. That's how simple marriage actually is. But we have people in our societies who haven't gotten married for 3 years because they're still talking, the families are still talking. And now she can't get married to him because the families are becoming a barrier, and she can't look for other prospects because this marriage is still in process. There's no such thing as a long engagement. There's no such thing as a long engagement. Get through with it. Get it done in a couple of months maximum. If she's right for him and he's right for her, there should be nothing else in between. You should be helping them get married. You should not become an obstacle in marriage. You should be helping them in getting married, not becoming an obstacle. And unfortunately, we have so many, we might have families in our society, the sisters are reaching 38, 39, 40, 50s. The brothers are reaching 38, 39, 40s and 50s, and they still haven't gotten married. Because marriage has become so hard. And what happens, especially in America, the avenue of marriage has become hard, the avenue of haram has become so easy. Now, astaghfirullah, they're even advertising it. They advertise it without any shame. What are we doing to make marriage easier? What are we doing to make marriage easier for the whole society? We have to think about this. And I don't even have time to go into it. But for example, we invest in many different things. Are we helping new couples get established? Are we providing them maybe interest-free loans? There are millionaires in our communities, alhamdulillah, truth be told. Are we helping set up maybe a $10,000 interest-free fund that the married couple can use to get settled? These are just long-term objectives that you can think of as a society. There are many different projects, but nevertheless, the society has a responsibility, the parents have a responsibility. And unfortunately, instead of the parents themselves helping, there are some parents, unfortunately, who are trying to get what they can get out of the marriage. When the dowry is given, they get the money instead of the daughter. Or they're trying to see how much of a slave can my daughter-in-law be to me. Unfortunately, this happens. Or how much of a slave can my son-in-law be to me? Yes, marriage brings societies together, but you have to fear Allah just as they have to fear Allah. Try to give more than you're getting. Try to give more than you are getting. Does that make sense? And at least if you're not doing anything positive, do not be a burden on the newlyweds. Do not be a burden on the married couple. Help them as much as possible for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. With that, inshallah, some of the questions that were mentioned, how two families should maintain a successful long-term relationship. Keep the channels of communication open, not just between the husband and wife, but between the families as well. Give gifts to one another. A husband should be, inshallah, if possible, giving a gift to his wife, even if it's a smile. So if you can't afford a gift every single day, how hard is it to smile every single day? Before you go to bed, make sure you forgive her for everything that she has done. If you're a female, before you go to bed, forgive your husband for everything that he has done before you go to bed. When both of you are together, when one of you is angry, make a promise that I will never be angry when my wife is angry. And the wife should make a promise, I will never be angry when my husband is angry. And so when he is upset, say something that makes him laugh, make him forget about his anger, and then resolve the dispute on a second day when none of you are angry. If you're the husband, if she gets upset, say something to make her smile. Say something to make her smile, and then what? Resolve this dispute on the second day. How many of you read the story when you were in kindergarten about Old Man Winter, right? The sun, right? And the winter wind were having an argument. This is a fable. And they both are trying to see who can make the man take off his coat. So the man was wearing his coat, and the winter wind says, I will blow and I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow the coat right off of him. And the more he blew on him, the more this gentleman held on to his coat, wrapped it tighter around him. And then the sun said, watch this. And he came out and he shone, obviously it's a fable, and it was so hot the man gently took off his coat. You're trying to win an argument against your wife. So you start getting louder and angrier, and where does this get you? This gets you nowhere. But the moment you make her smile, you make her laugh, she wants to do something kind back for you. So she might surprise you with getting done whatever you want to get done. So the point is, and likewise for your husband, you start arguing back with them, you're going to have your way, I'm going to have my way. You're never going to get anywhere. So never fight at the same time, make each other laugh, forgive each other. Do not keep count of arguments. Do not. Burn that paper. And whenever you have an argument, don't bring back old arguments. Remember the time when you did this? Remember the time when your mother did that? So inshallah, there's a lot more advice. I apologize. There's a lot of material, but I will not have time to go over it. If you go to SBNY, Sharia Board, New York, they have a whole presentation on how married couples should act. What are things that are increase the happiness in their marriage? What are things that they should never do? What are things they should avoid? And then finally, I was asked about counseling, marriage counseling. Once a person gets married, who should they get counsel from? And from the Quran we know that obviously we're supposed to first resort to the families. First resort to yourselves. The husband and wife should keep this matter private as much as possible and try to resolve it internally. If that absolutely doesn't work, then you go towards the families. And you involve who amongst your family members? Those family members are the father and the mother who actually want the children's marriage to succeed. Right? You want those family members who want the marriage to succeed. Sometimes there's jealousy and hatred amongst family members. Do not invite them to the reconciliation meeting. They'll only make it worse. But you do resolve to your family first. Those who have the married couple's best interests at heart. If that doesn't work, then you get arbitrators from both sides. What are the qualifications for arbitrators? Again, I'm not familiar with this society, but there are the societies where somebody appoints, let's say the imam as a wali. And we have to understand the danger of making somebody who's a non-mahram as a wali. Many times, unfortunately, this person gets close to one side or the other. And then they end up becoming a distraction from the actual marriage and a means for divorce. And as far as if a couple is contemplating divorce, they should realize if they go to attorneys, what happens? As soon as you go to a divorce counselor, a divorce attorney, what do? They make you sign a piece of paper that says that you can only exclusively resort to them. You cannot have a no-compete clause. You cannot go to anybody else. Why? Because they want to make their 10,000. They want to make their money. The attorneys aren't there because they have your heart at best interest, right? They want to know how much they can get out of the other party. But if an attorney brings a married couple back together, they're not getting paid. Truth be told, they're not getting paid. So you want to go to pious, righteous scholars who understand the environment. You want pious, righteous scholars who understand the environment. If a couple, let's say for example, a couple is from a certain area overseas, and you get a scholar from a different area, let's say a Syrian scholar who's trying to help with an Asian family, he might not be fully acclimated as well. If you get a non-scholar, he might not know what the rules of divorce are. So there are many things you have to look out for. Find a righteous, pious scholar who is acclimated with the culture and try to get them there. For example, in Sharia Board, New York, they have scholars who charge $0, and they've actually had attorneys upset at them because the couple reconciliated. So it took a number of efforts, but if you want reconciliation, that's the objective of a marriage. People get upset all the time. Who here has never got upset at their brother if they have a brother? Raise your hand. If you've never gotten upset at your brother in your whole life. Who has never gotten upset at their sister if you have sisters? Or na'udhu billah, their parents, astaghfirullah. Children, we have, we're hot-headed, astaghfirullah. But we get upset at many different people. But we cannot let this destroy society. So I'll conclude with this, inshallah. Shaitan gets happy when it breaks apart two groups of people. When he destroys two groups of people, he's very happy. Number one, a student of knowledge. Because these students of knowledge grow up to, inshallah, heal society. So when he distracts a student from studying Islam, he's very happy. Because now the society will not be healed through a righteous scholar, obviously, a righteous, pious scholar. And the second he really gets happy about destroying is a couple, a married couple. Because this married couple brings together two societies. And when he brings them apart, he creates a fight between two whole societies. So he's happy. All he does is he makes the husband say, hey, the food is disgusting. And now she's upset, and this brings back a 10-year dilemma that they had, and then he starts getting upset, and this propagates. So shaitan really tries to attack marriages. What should we do? We should not listen to shaitan. He is our sworn enemy. So whenever you get angry, hold down your anger. Do not get upset. Do not get upset. Do not get upset. And what can overcome your anger? The fear of Allah. Usually nothing overcomes our anger except the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we have done sins that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has seen. He knows us open, like an open book. And if we hold our wives accountable, Allah can hold us accountable. And if we hold our husbands accountable, Allah can hold us accountable. So we have to fear Allah, and this fear of Allah will inshallah overcome and overpower our anger. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with pious marriages. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with becoming part of pious communities that tend and lend to these pious marriages. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for the mistakes I've said today, inshallah. I will open up to a brief question and answer session, but I know I think I've gone over my time, inshallah. So any questions, inshallah?
My nephew is basically searching to get married, and he found someone that she's not praying every day, or she's not praying hijab. So he asked her that he wants her to pay 5 times a day, put on the hijab, and they get married. And she agreed to it. She said that yes, I'll try, slowly. So should he get married to her in this situation?
So to generalize the question, so let's say, for example, one of the partners, right, the husband or the wife, he's interested in the bride-to-be or the groom-to-be, and he or she might be more religious, right? So when he advises this other person to become more religious, they say, okay, when I get married, I'll be more religious. Should he or should he not get married to her? Marriage is a lot more complicated than just this, so I don't know per se. But as far as marriage, if a person is looking for a certain level of piety, he should get that level of piety. If she is becoming more pious, such as in your situation, you have to look at the intention. The piety has to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The piety has to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if they're pious, because Allah, we cannot force anybody to become Muslim, we cannot force anybody to actually pray, but we are advised as caretakers. الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ. Men have been made responsible over women. So yes, when your child has reached the age of 7, you encourage him to pray. When he reaches the age of 10, you force him to pray. You basically say you have to pray now. And our wives should, we're going to be held responsible for them as well. So they should be fulfilling the rights of Islam. That is without a doubt. So if you're already in a marriage where you are more pious than maybe your husband, or you're more pious than maybe your wife, you should get your partner, your spouse, to be more pious. You have to encourage them. You have to encourage them. Maybe just the word of encouragement will slowly bring them closer to Islam. And you encourage them through kind words. If you're not in such an engagement already, my advice is to look for someone who is pious. My advice is to actually start off with something pious. There's a saying that It is easier to adapt and mold 100 children than it is to change one old man, right? Allah SWT knows best for the most, but a lot of times, they say an old dog, right? You can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? So it becomes hard to change somebody, right, who's become accustomed to a certain thing. So piety will benefit you in every single thing, to the point that when a mother is about to nurse, it helps in that. When the child is being brought up, it helps in that. If the family is not religious, then who knows, you might be in a retirement home when you hit your 50s and 60s, right, or 70s. So piety is a foundation for every single thing. And believe it or not, you can have a scholar as the husband. If the wife isn't as pious, she's the one who's going to raise up the child most of the time. Unfortunately, we're men and we slack. We slack a lot. So a lot of times we're outside. What happens, a lot of the child rearing still to this day, even in non-Muslim environments, a lot of the time the child rearing still falls on the shoulders of the female. So whatever her personality will be, it'll be portrayed on the child. In the story of Umar al-Anhu and the pious daughter that he chose to marry to his son, who had the taqwa? The daughter had the taqwa, right? The son has taqwa as well, obviously, but the daughter had taqwa and taught it to her daughter, and then her daughter had a son who was Umar bin Abdul Aziz. As a matter of fact, the father's side was from the Umayyad dynasty, right? And I don't have time to go into the dynasty and what they did, positive or negative, but the mother was very pious. So a pious mother is absolutely important. I didn't get to cover a lot of the material, but this whole world is going to end. It's basically just something that you use and you discard. But amongst the best things on this earth is a pious woman. There's nothing that competes to a pious woman. A pious woman will stay with you, even if you're sent, boycotted to Shir Abi Talib by the Quraysh. She will be with you. When you don't have food on the table, a pious woman will be with you. When you're going through the rough patches in life, a pious woman will be with you. But if she married you because you're an attorney, she married you because you're a doctor, she married you because you're caking, and then you don't have that money anymore, what happens when the money's dried up? Where's she to be found? And likewise, the husband, you have to pick a pious husband. When he gets angry, he will never hurt you. A pious husband, when he gets angry, if he can't smile and shake it off, he will stay quiet. Who doesn't want that for their daughters? A pious son will never, forget raising his hand, he won't even yell at her. Who doesn't want that for their child? Whether you're secular or religious, we all want the same thing for our daughters and our sons. We want them to be treated in the best manner. And that comes from Islam. That comes from Islam. Not from being a feminist or being whatever else, being all bravado and being macho. That's not where it comes from. It comes from truly fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you truly fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you put Allah in front of everything else, even if you're sleeping. Even if you're tired, you still sacrifice for your spouse, for your wife and for your husband. So, obviously, a pious seed, a good seed, bears good fruit, right? So, but obviously we're not in the best of situations, so you have to decide for yourself. But you should pick taqwa. A woman gets married for 4 reasons. لِمَالِهَا وَلِجَمَالِهَا وَلِحَسَبِهَا وَلِدِينِهَا فَاظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ تَرِبَتْ يَدَاكَ. A woman can get married, usually gets married for one of 4 reasons. For her wealth. And there are some societies that are built on marrying wealthy women. There are. Different cultures differ. وَلِجَمَالِهَا. Some cultures, they only look at beauty. Like what's out so outwardly. And if they're not as beautiful, they put pounds of makeup and they're beautiful now. And then once you go home, you realize it's not that, right? So some people marry just based on beauty. And it could be for the husband too. He has to be very handsome, right? And they base it solely on that. وَلِنَسَبِهَا. Sometimes she comes from a royal family. Or she's from the family of this and family of that. So I'm marrying her to this family because of royalty. وَلِدِينِهَا. And sometimes some women get married because of her religion, her piety, her fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَاظْفَرْ بِذَاتِ الدِّينِ. Pick religion. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Pick religion, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. Pick religion, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. I'm from Jersey City, and unfortunately, we care about how people look. And subhanAllah, this is something that's very fake. And I have to just tell you an example. There are some people who don't like the way they look, and they get cosmetic surgery, right? So for example, they don't like maybe a unibrow, like, oh, he has a unibrow, or he has a long nose, or she has, this and that. For some societies, unibrows are beautiful. For some societies, long or short noses are beautiful. But there are people who've had facial surgery, cosmetic surgery, and after their surgery, they look so much worse that they wish they had their original back. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates us beautiful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates every single one of us beautiful and perfect. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has beautified our external. We have to work on our akhlaq, our internal. But we have this sickness of looking at beauty. What is beauty? What is beauty? And if you ask somebody who's been married for 30 years or 40 years, and you ask, does it matter about beauty anymore? They're like, no, I just want peace in my house. Right? Honestly speaking, don't ask youngsters like, oh, all right, like nowadays for youngsters, they don't even eat food anymore. They go into a restaurant, they start, taking a picture of the food, posting it up on whatever. Look how beautiful the food is. They didn't even finish their whole food, right? It's all about appearance and appearance and appearance. The appearance of looking at beautiful food. The food could taste disgusting and look delicious and they're happy. But that's not what you truly want. In marriage, you want inner beauty. You want inner beauty is made from piety. That's what you're looking for. So if you want advice on marriage, ask people who've been married for 20, 30 years. They'll tell you what's truly important. They will tell you what's truly important. She takes care of you. Alhamdulillah, you're the king. And if you take care of her, she's a queen. You're not going to be worried, what if some ear hair or nose hair sticking out a bit on some days? She knows everything about you. After 20, 30 years, she knows how you really look. You might get done before you go to the masjid, and you know how she looks. You know what I mean? I can't even talk about all the stuff that husband and wives know about each other. Nobody else knows this except the husband and wives. So you should look at what's important. Fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Does he make her laugh? Does he have a nice personality? Does she have a nice personality? Does she make him laugh? Why? For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you in that, inshallah. Any other questions? Question in the back.
Do you have any advice on how to balance the rights of your wife and the rights of the rest of the women in the family?
The question was, do I have any advice on how to balance the rights of the wife and the rights of the rest of the family? This might take days, and people have written books about this. The bottom line is this: you have to be fair, right? And fair, as-sirat al-mustaqim, it's a very straight path, right? A very straight path. For those who've taken math, as soon as you take a small tangent, even if it's 1 degree off, if you stretch it for a mile, how far apart are you? It's a huge segue. You have to be precisely on the straight path. Your wife has the right, give her the right. Whoever is becoming overbearing, whoever's overstepping her right, you have to tell them kindly, especially if it's our parents or some elder, tell them kindly what her rights are. And similarly, you tell her what their rights are as well. Every single party has a right. If it's your mother, if your brother, right? If it's your mother, for example, and your wife, you are beholden to your mother. She has her rights, and your wife has rights on you as well. You have to give your mother her rights and your wife her rights. But each one must know what the other one's rights are. No one can transgress. And she isn't beholden to your mother, technically speaking, except out of akhlaq. And your mother isn't beholden to your wife, except out of akhlaq. Akhlaq means mannerisms, right? But you are beholden to both. So you have to walk that fine line. You have to walk that fine line. Umar radhiyallahu ta'ala, who was so fair, the Sahaba used to say, may Allah have mercy on Umar. He was so just that he couldn't keep any friends. Think about it. What does that mean? Because even though you might be fair, if your friend does something wrong, you look the other way. But Umar did not allow his friends to get a pass. He was that precise. Similarly, we have to be fair with our parents and give them their rights, and we have to be fair with our wives. There is a fine line you have to walk, right? And I can't talk more without knowing details, but you have to realize everyone should be told their responsibility. And unfortunately, we're growing up in a society where sometimes maybe we don't realize the rights of our wives, and we have to be taught this. We have to be taught the rights of our parents, and when you become a parent, then you have to remember when you were a newlywed and realize what they go through. And remember that, and then you also have to provide the same. SubhanAllah, I know a pious family in America, mashallah, where the mother-in-law is so kind and caring for the wife. And the wife is like that for her mother-in-law. But this comes out when a person tries to fulfill their responsibility more than asking for their right. That's just the nature of how things work. You have to first look in how you can fulfill everyone else's responsibility. And you constantly persevere. If you persevere, slowly you'll get your rights. Slowly you'll get your rights. And don't let shaitan tell you of all the abuse that you're enduring. It is hard. But you have to fulfill everybody else's rights, and slowly they'll be fulfilling your rights, inshallah. And obviously this is from not just the perspective of the son, the perspective of the father as well, the perspective of the daughter, the wife. Every single person has to realize that every single member is responsible, and they have to fulfill their responsibilities. Anything else?
My question might be a little drawn out, but we live in a society in the U.S. where the past 20, 30, 40 years, we hear about the feminist revolution and all that. And, even though we're Muslims, we are born and brought up here, raised here, and then some are immigrants, they're raised here. You have a society where, frankly speaking, what's happening is there's a lot of female empowerment, which is fine. But what happens is it has its goods, but it also has its negatives. So what's happening that I've seen is a lot of over-empowerment amongst females that has sort of negatively affected marriages to the point that it's in Muslim marriages, not just mainstream, but even in Muslim marriages, that's dissuaded opinions and perceptions of women, how they should be. But can you elaborate on what is the Sunnah way? Because what happens is, as Muslims, we're going to try to follow the Sunnah. Can you elaborate on what is the Sunnah way of a husband's responsibilities or the wife's responsibilities to her husband? So you have two discussions. I mean, are you going to have two opinions in a marriage, or are you going to have one? And if that's so, with one opinion, whose opinion holds the higher weight based on Islamically? Because what happens is, here, if a husband has an opinion, sometimes it might be to a point where he has to let go of his opinion because there's an atmosphere of female empowerment that doesn't allow him to give that opinion. But in the Sunnah, what is the actual way, and who would have the higher weight of their opinions in that aspect?
Okay, there are multiple overloaded words used, and but I want to tackle it inshallah one at a time. Number one, Allah SWT says in the Quran that I'll translate that you do not believe until you make Rasulullah you will not believe until you make Rasulullah as an arbiter and as an arbitrator between your disputes, and then you are pleased with this result and you don't find any issues in your heart about it. You do not truly believe until you make Rasulullah as an arbitrator, as a judge between your disputes, and then you fully accept this resolution and you do not find any issues in your heart about it. So this is number one, right? So this is why we say married by taqwa. This was applied to the males in society for their disputes and also for husband and wives disputes, right? So this is, they have to go back to the Sunnah. The question now becomes, who is the interpreter of the Sunnah? The husband says, I found, this hadith, I went online, and I found this ayah of the Quran, and it says, I rule over you. So what does that make her? My subject, right? And then the wife also says, Rasulullah used to take care of the chores. So every single person goes online, tries to find some dalil for themselves. Obviously, the arbiter has to be a proper scholar, inshallah. But I want to step back and talk about this and many other movements. A lot of times we come across these movements and we don't know where they spun out of, right? So we have to really look at that holistically. Where do these movements come out of? I personally, when I've seen different movements, not just the feminist movement, but many other movements that have happened, I think they were born out of an injustice. They were born, meaning they were created as a quasi-resolution to an injustice that was occurring. And then the resolution itself was not a proper resolution. It went overboard or it missed the spot, missed the mark. Because the proper way for any single person, you can say feminist movement, you can say whatever movement you want, you can call it the liberal, conservative, whatever. There are many different paradigms, many different movements out there. But the only accepted path and methodology is what? The Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Correct? The Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If there was any deficiency, what would have happened? Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum, the whole ayah, then this day we have completed your religion. Who is saying this? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the creator of everything, who knows about all these movements. Correct? So what happened was, there was a point in time, especially amongst the feminists, right? Susan B. Anthony and all them. Back then what happened? Women were treated like servants. In America, non-Muslims I'm talking about, in the 1900s. They were treated like servants, and they didn't have property rights. Islam had property rights 1400 plus years ago. But the non-Muslims, the Christians in America, the women did not have property rights. And they were being abused. And they had all this, I don't even have time to go into the feminist movement, what they have endured. Not talking about what they've done, what they've endured at the hands of men in the 1900s. So this spawned into an action. We need justice. But nobody was serving this justice, so we need a movement. And they've become a movement. So now jumping into the family now. Arguments will happen, but the husband will not always be right, neither will the wife be always right. And sometimes the husband, even when the husband is right, he might not be 100% right. He might be just 60% right and she's 40% right. Or they're both right, they're just not communicating, right? The husband who kept on giving chicken breasts to his wife because he loved chicken breasts. For 10 years he kept on offering chicken breasts to her. And she would constantly offer him drumsticks and the legs and thighs because that's what she loved. After 10 years they talked and she said, I love drumsticks, but I give it to you because I love you. And then he says, I love chicken breasts, but I haven't, I give it to you because I love you. So then they realized that, subhanAllah, that if they had only communicated earlier, they were both actually right. The bottom line is this, that you have to communicate. But now there are some things that even if you're a feminist or whatever you call yourself, liberal or conservative, there are some things, some lines that you can't cross. And the husband will absolutely be asked about this on the Day of Judgment. He cannot allow her to do this. He himself cannot allow himself to do this. He cannot be engaging in interest. He cannot sell alcohol, so on and so forth. Even inside the house, he can't let her do haram. His responsibility to her, and just the fard, just the fara'id, just the minimal, clothing, shelter, clothing, and food. And then a lot more beyond that. Kindness, niceness, love, security, right? He has to give this to her. To the point that whatever wealth she gets is actually her wealth. It really is her wealth. That's why obviously we get more in inheritance, because we spend more. That's in the whole complete system. But whatever money she gets, including the dowry and everything else, it's her money. We can't touch it. But she cannot allow somebody who you do not approve of in your house. Obviously if the house is yours, or you're renting and you're paying for it, then it's your responsibility, and you also get the privileges that come with it as well. So she cannot break your trust. She cannot allow the people to enter the house, right? So the trust is big as well. A pious woman will make sure she fulfills the trust of her husband, not just included in her chastity, but also in his wealth and whatever his property is. And likewise, the husband has to secure his chastity. I didn't even talk about chastity when it comes to boys and girls. This is another different topic. Boys, you have to make sure your boys are chaste. You have to make sure of this, just like you make sure your girls are chaste. But now when you get to the arguments, it doesn't matter if you call yourself a feminist, it doesn't matter if you call yourself whatever, a macho man or something like that. Whatever you are, the sunnah is the haqq. And you'll have to come to a compromise. But the compromise ends when there's haram involved. So now you have boundaries, hard boundaries, the haram. She can't help you do the haram, you can't help her do the haram. She can't allow you to do haram, you can't allow her to do haram. Then once it's within the walls of halal, you're within the walls of halal, so then you have to realize and come to a compromise. You are held responsible, and yes, the ultimate authority is the husband, because you are made responsible. So this has its trade-off. You'll be held accountable, you have to make sure you sweat and whatnot for this, but you also are held responsible. You have to make sure you're held accountable on the Day of Judgment. You have to make sure your children are taken care of, your wife is taken care of, and so she has to help you in that. Does that make sense? But that doesn't mean that this is something that you can bring home and say, ha, You know, like I win the argument. That's not how it is. In a true pious household, each one is helping the other. Each one is actually helping the other get to that middle path. You might be a little more to the right, she pulls you a little to the left till you're balanced. Or you're a little to the left, she pulls you to the right, and vice versa. Does that make sense? But a marriage is about compromise. Now, let's go into the feminist movement, and those who are feminists, even amongst the Muslims. Those who are feminists for years and decades, ask them, how's it going? Ask them, how's it going? Even if you're a liberal, you can't be a liberal for too long. Islam is the middle path. You automatically have to recorrect, readjust. Even though they call the markets have a correction, society has a correction. You had the 70s with all this free whatever, right, in the 70s, and then what happened in the 80s? In the 80s, you had Reagan coming with the hardcore family values. This was a correction. Left, right, left, right. In a household, just because again, we're giving a name to feminism. There are things that men do. Maybe they come from a society where they think they can have a heavy hand. So you're not giving it a name. You're just calling yourself being a man. That's wrong. So we're giving the name feminism to them, but we're not giving men who are acting unjust a name. The name is being a tyrant. If you're a man that abuses his wife, you're a tyrant. You're a tyrant. You're acting like Fir'aun. So even though we don't give men these names, we're giving females these names, every side has to come to the balance. What does true feminism mean? A woman can exist without a man. Is that true? Within one generation, you put all these women on one island without one single man, they'll die off. They won't have children. No matter how much they petition their senators and congresswomen and whatever else, they can't have children. Their congresswomen can't bear children for them. A woman, a whole bunch of feminist women on one island cannot have children. And you take a whole bunch of men who are machismo and bravo and brolic and all masculine, you put them on an island by themselves. Can they have any children? No. You need to work together. You need to compromise. But the compromise is in every argument and in any argument. Does that make sense, inshallah? But the boundaries are hard set. What's the boundary? Haram. She can't do haram, but neither can you do haram. You can't do haram, neither can she do haram. When she sees that you're being fair, it'll be easier for her to swallow. But you have to try to be fair. And one more note, inshallah, a lot of times these speech, no matter, I don't know if you liked it or not, but any speech, it has a certain value. But remember how banner ads were in the 2000s? You saw a banner ad. At first it was like all shiny or whatever else. And after a while you ignored it. You became accustomed to it. How many of you look at the banners on the highway? You ignore it. You become accustomed to it. That's how speech is a lot of times. You hear a good speech or you hear something, it doesn't have much value. But what you put into practice in your family has a long-lasting value. You have to practice Islam. Your son has to practice Islam around her. If he wants her to pray her fajr, he has to get up for tahajjud. He has to do more than her. If he wants her to give in zakah, he has to give in sadaqah. You always have to do a little bit more than they do, than you require of them. If you want them to come to the middle path, you have to buy them flowers. You have to buy them gifts. Does that make sense? Because practice is worth more than speech. Practice is worth more than speech. And we often say, I will say this and she will listen. That's not how it works. Look at children. Tell this child, mashallah, to pray 4 rak'at and with wudu. He's not going to get it. Wallahu alam, maybe, mashallah, he may be a child prodigy. But when he sees his parents praying, what does a 2-year-old do? Or 3-year-old or whatever age? They say, Allahu Akbar. They start going down and they copy. Why do they copy? Because they saw it. And believe it or not, we're just big children. We see something and we copy it. That's why we like certain hats or we wear certain clothes and whatever else. We saw somebody else, it looked good, so we copied it. Not because somebody said you should wear that kufi, because you liked it somewhere and you put it on, honestly. Some people like a certain designer or whatever else. So practice also applies to women. When you're just with your wife, she will try to make up for that, inshallah, as well, and repay you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward us. I apologize for not having any solid answers. I have not resolved anything, but you have to practice Islam. You have to lead by example, inshallah. It will slowly become easier for you, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you, inshallah. I think I've gone over my time, inshallah, way over my time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your patience, inshallah. May Allah forgive me for my mistakes. I think there's dinner as well, inshallah. So everybody's invited to dinner, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Again, please be kind to each other. Please be kind to each other. Please be kind to each other. Let them win. let them win. If it's not haram, let them win the argument, inshallah. And if it's a fundamental item, bring it up the next day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair, Maulana Sahab. On behalf of MSMC, we thank, inshallah, we benefited from his knowledge.